We're ready to start the F-Secure webcast for our Threat Report 2013, the first Threat Report we published this year. My name is Mikko Hyppönen. This here is Sean Sullivan.
Hi.
How are you doing, Sean?
I'm great.
He's doing great. Excellent. It's 5:30 here in Helsinki, and we have people who have accepted our invitation for this webcast from all over the world in various weird time zones. So good morning and good evening to everybody. What we'll be doing is that we'll be going through a wrap-up of what's in the threat report. And the threat report we are releasing actually right after this webcast in half an hour is 50 pages. 50 pages of information on what's happening in the world of computer security. We cover APTs, we cover various kinds of vulnerabilities, exploits, exploit packs, what's changing in the world of the threats users are running into. We speak about governmental surveillance, we speak about Bitcoin mining for criminal use, what's happening with Mac malware, and so on. You want the full details, you better download the PDF. What do you think about the report, Sean?
That's great.
Yeah.
So the guys have worked really hard on it,
Yes.
and it's got a lot of good material.
And this is a joint work done by F-Secure Labs, mostly by people physically seated here in Helsinki in our labs in Finland or in our labs in Malaysia. We have 16 people participating in the report this time around.
From labs, all researchers, marketing people.
So, I'll switch from the video every now and then to show you graphs or details on the kind of material we're looking at. The first screen share I want to show to you is actually this one. So that's the top 1 detections that our products, that F-Secure antivirus or F-Secure Internet Security has been blocking amongst our customer base during the first 6 months of the year. And we can block malware at various different levels. When we, for example, block a Java exploit that tries to take over a user Windows computer, we actually don't really know, just based on that, what kind of an attack it was. I mean, we know it tried to take the computer over with a Java exploit, but we don't really know what it would have done to the computer if that Java exploit would have been successful. And that's partially the explanation why the vast majority of the things that we actually block at our customer computers are actually members of the MyJava or MyJava, malicious Java family. Isn't that right, Sean?
Yeah, malicious Java, which the word MyJava means what in Finnish?
It's beaver.
Right.
Beaver, the animal in Finnish,
Which
is MyJava.
Any Finns watching it, they might look kind of comical, the name, but it's malicious Java. That plus 3 other exploit detections make up about 58% of our top 10 detections, which these are upstream reports from our customer base, so that's actually both we're seeing more exploits in the wild, but also we have focused on blocking exploits more than well, if you block the exploit, you don't need to deal with the payload. So.
Right, and that's what we want to do. We want to block the malware as early as possible. We're not really even interested that much what it would have done if it would have been successful if it's not successful. So that's why we see so much of this happen.
Yeah. So this is actually, to toot our own horn, kind of a good graph from our point of view, because more than the majority of stuff we're blocking is preventative.
Mm-hmm. What else do you find interesting in here?
Well, 7% is auto run.
Yes.
So sneaker nets are alive and well. These are probably not our customers. This is probably like old malware that they're being exposed to, but when they plug in a USB
well, there's new
drive.
auto-run malware as well. And of course, auto-run is not just USB sticks or USB keys. It's also CD-ROMs and removable hard drives.
Well, but
like
with
that.
Windows 7, at least that's what I'm thinking. Some of our customer base, auto-run should be turned off by default.
Yes.
So they shouldn't be as much at threat. But of course, our product would then say, there's an auto-run worm on this device.
Right. So the fact that we find an auto-run worm doesn't necessarily mean that you would have been hit by it. If you're running Windows 8, you put in a USB stick with an auto-run.in file, it would not have run anyway. Yeah. But we will block it anyway. There's malware on the stick. We'll tell you, just in case you'll take the stick to another computer and that would have been infected.
My concern is if 7% of our upstream is from auto-run worms, clearly people are plugging in USB drives, and I've seen stuff of late that has like APTs. You sprinkle some documents that have kind of exploits embedded in them in the parking lot of an organization you want to hit. So that 7% auto run shows that people are willing to jam whatever into their machine that's gotten something infected on it.
And that's a good thing to remember. Not all the malware that come from USB sticks are actually auto run malware. You can have exploits on the USB stick, and they will hurt you even if you have auto run disabled, or even if you would have blocked the auto run files. Now, an interesting detail I heard last week, I was discussing with people, with actually professional pilots who work with plane security, and they actually mentioned that at one aircraft factory, they every month find infected planes, which I was really baffled about.
The plane has malware on it.
The plane has malware on it, and I didn't really get full technical details on what that means, but I'm guessing it means that, for example, people fake their Android device, which has Android malware on it, then they want to charge it, so they use a USB cable and plug it into a USB port on a plane. And that port gives them power. It might even have something to mount, but it's not Windows system. So the malware from the phone will copy an auto-run file on the share, thinking it's maybe a Windows share or Windows drive, but it's not. So nothing's going to happen on the plane. But if you later go through the plane and scan all the drives for malware, you will find an auto-run file. So there really is malware on the plane, although the plane isn't infected, I hope. And actually, we discussed this. For example, some of the new planes, for example, the latest 350 Airbus has a Windows. One of the screens at the cockpit is actually a Windows device. So they do have stuff there which is running Windows as well. But I'm guessing most of these cases aren't related to that device at all. So another interesting thing about the graph we were looking at is the two botnets which were mentioned in particular, Zero Access and Configure. Configure is now 5.5 years old.
Well, would be botnet worm that the industry kept from ever becoming a botnet. That's several years old.
Yes, but it's still the single largest botnet that we know of. It does nothing. It's basically a dead botnet, but it's very prevalent. The number 2 is Zero Access, which is considered to be the second largest botnet on the planet, and we'll get back to Zero Access a little bit later. Then next up in our threat report, we discussed about watering hole attacks. And this is a special subset of APT attacks, advanced persistent threats, or like we say, targeted attacks. When targeted attacks started 10 years ago, they were email almost always. Send a targeted email to a target, and they will open up the document, which is a Word file, which has an exploit, which drops a backdoor. That's the stereotypical APT. Now, it doesn't work that well anymore because organizations know that this is the way they are being targeted, and emails being filtered better and better. So watering hole bypasses this problem for the attacker by not trying to send an email to the target, but instead trying to figure out a website where the target might have been going, target or people like the target, and then hack the website and have an exploit on the site, not in email, but on a public website, which typically would be visited by the victim. And that's a clever way of going around the problem of email filtering from the point of view of the attacker.
Yeah, because if you give a real-world example, actually, now that I think about it, in some client confidentiality classes, or seminars we were doing at a law firm where I used to work, they reminded us that if you're at a basketball game of a local university and you're talking shop, there was one instance where a reporter for the local newspaper just happened to be sitting behind the two lawyers that were talking about a rather big client, and then the story broke in the newspaper. So in that case, the basketball arena would be the watering hole, and the guys should not have been talking shop there because then the reporter took advantage of that. Watering hole could literally, like, if you want to compromise if you want to know secrets about a company, you could just hang out at the bar that the guys drink at after hours and just listen to the conversations. Yeah, so it's same with software. You want to nail a company, go after the developers where they're talking shop on the internet.
Right. Yeah. All right, then we move on to world of mobile security, and we have a larger special section in the threat report about an Android Trojan called Stealth. And Stealth is a very versatile backdoor, which we found in remarkable numbers. We have found around 1,300 samples of Stealth in our labs, and we can split those into 3 main families. And it's a backdoor which gives full access to the attacker on the infected devices. And the access includes, for example, the possibility of reading all the files on the phone, sending text messages from the phone, initiating phone calls from the phone, also intercepting TANs, basically banking one-time code used in many different banks. One interesting thing about the way it's controlled is that it actually uses Twitter as a control channel. Here's a screenshot from one of the accounts, or actually it uses this mechanism of finding Twitter accounts that are used to control it. And the idea why use Twitter for any botnet for control purposes is that it makes it harder to take it down. If there's just a website, like a traditional CNC website, we can shut down the site. We can't shut down Twitter. And if it's using a algorithm to generate account names, it looks for information. There might be millions of possible accounts used for this. And
actually, it also uses something else besides Twitter these days. And we did actually sinkhole some CNCs ourselves of a Stell's botnet, which then moved to a Russian social network called Juke, I think is the name of it. So it's easier to set these up on the fly when someone tries to abuse the command and control server, then this can be more rapidly updated.
Yeah, and basically use a backup mechanism. I mean, if the domain is taken away, it can use Twitter to regain control. And we actually list the domain names it uses in the full report. And we did also a little bit of studying on where in the world the victims of Stealth were. But then they were mostly in Russia. Russia and, well, mostly Russia.
Yeah, and other countries that were neighboring. And this is of a particular one that we did actually, something called the CNC. Thousands of devices, and based on the person pushing out the files, it seemed like dozens of free cracked games. That's what he was pushing out, and that netted him several thousand in his particular Stealth botnet.
All right. So what do we know about the author of Stealth?
Well, the one guy that we kind of located that is pushing out some of these variants, or particular variants of the Stealth that we've been tracking, he had a nickname on the account that linked back to other social media sites that he had. Ukrainian guy, looked to be in his 20s.
All right.
Seems to be a phone enthusiast because he had screenshots of everything from very old school phones to current Android devices.
Right. So,
entrepreneur, young up and comer that's just kind of messing around with stuff, seeing what he can do with it.
All right. We also published a little bit more statistics about the mobile malware problem in general. There's no change in the platform game. We still haven't found mobile malware for Windows Phone. We have one unconfirmed report of Windows Phone malware, and that's the FinSpy governmental Trojan. In one of their leaked advertisement packages, they mention both Windows Mobile and Windows Phone as platforms that they support for the FinSpy Trojan. We don't know if that's true. We don't know if it really exists. We have seen the Windows Mobile version. We haven't seen a Windows Phone version. If there indeed would be a Windows Phone version of FinSpy, that would be the very first mobile malware for Windows Phone. Until we've seen it, we consider Windows Phone to be still completely clean as a platform, which is sort of surprising. We have Windows platform which has no malware, unless you count Xbox as Windows platform, because Xbox has no malware either. For iPhone, not a big change. We don't really see new iOS malware. We have seen one rogue ad network which is pushing ads that are shown inside apps in iPhone, which will tell you messages like a virus found or 317 viruses found, and it will try to fool you into giving out your phone number and will subscribe you to a phone service. So that's not iPhone malware, but it's people.
It's a scam that people don't recognize the difference between an app and the scam, though. So
exactly. So
it's a bad ad network, and
so basically there's nothing on iPhone either. And iOS 7 hasn't changed anything in regards to that. But on Android, as you can see from the numbers here on screen, there is activity. It's fairly futile trying to count the amount of infected APK installation packages we've seen, but that's what we're doing here, futile or not. The numbers are very large. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of known infected files. So what do you make out of all of this?
Well, with Android, it's open enough platform that you just take a shotgun approach, and that's why we have so many variants. That, from my point of view, Apple has always been more secure, not because of the operating system, but because the closed market. If you can get noticed there, why would you waste that on malware? Partner up with somebody that can sell a useful product.
So is Android a failure because they have all this malware on it?
So they've got more installs worldwide, so it
turns out it's actually very successful. And this reminds me of another operating system from 10 years ago, Windows XP. Windows XP, where the security absolutely sucked, but it was a massive commercial success.
Yeah, they probably go hand in hand that way. So it's multiple vendors, one operating system.
You don't have to have good security to have a very, very well-selling product. Turns out, which is a bit surprising, but it turns out to be true. XP proved that, Android is proving that. Out of the competition, comparing Android to iOS and Windows Phone, it's clearly the least secure platform, just looking at the real-world number of attacks against it. Yet it is clearly the market leader. 80% of the new smartphones are running Android.
If you had engineers, only engineers using Android, as opposed to human beings who say okay to allow permissions, what would you say?
Well, yeah, the engineers would be different, yes.
So, I mean, Android, like when you say it's the least secure, it's the least secure for human beings, it seems.
Right.
Because of the market forces. I'm not necessarily believing that the technology is any worse or better.
And here's a recent example of what this means in practice. This is a search I did personally today on the official Google Play Store. There's a bit of a buzz around BlackBerry users. Remember BlackBerries, those old devices? They were very successful because they had their own messaging system, BlackBerry messaging, which was only available to BlackBerry devices. And they've changed their strategy, and they announced that they will make the same messenger functionality available for iPhone and Android this past weekend. Lots of people were looking for it. And it was released on App Store on iPhone. There was one copy of it. People downloaded it. It works. On Google Play, as you can see, there's gazillion different versions of it, made by companies called BlackBerry LLC or BlackBerry Limited, which all sound very real. And none of these is the real one. In fact, the real one still wasn't released an hour ago when I looked at it. So people go look for BlackBerry BBM and download something which isn't the real one. And that's the main problem. Rogue or somehow Trojanized applications. All right, so after the discussion on mobile functionality, and there's like 15 pages of stats and descriptions of mobile stuff, then we have a section in the new threat report about targeted attacks. And we've done interesting new research related to the files that we see in targeted attacks. We discussed about watering hole, how it's a new kind of attacking system, but vast majority of the cases we still see are traditional, meaning that they're done with document files. Number one, PDFs, number two, Word, number three, XLS or Excel files, and then PowerPoint files. And what's interesting about these files is that they always look like something. I mean, there's a bait. You get an email with the document file, you click on the file, you get something on your screen. And that typically tells us quite a bit about the targets. And this is interesting to us because in many of the cases we get these samples through anonymized sample feeds, which means we don't really know who the target was. But just looking at the files, we can learn a little bit about the targets, or at least the target industry or the field. So for example, if we receive a file which speaks about missiles, what would that tell us? Target has something to do with missiles, maybe defense industry, defense contractors, maybe militaries. So that's interesting. So over the last summer, we built technologies here which actually extract text automatically from the incoming APT document files. So even if it's an image file, we do sort of like an OCR and figure out what texts are shown to the user when they are hit by a targeted attack. And we also extract all the plain text, and we can then try to make statistics about what kind of people or what kind of organizations are being targeted based on what kind of documents are being sent to them.
So let me ask you a question. So it's the documents coming into our backend. Mm-hmm. They're automatically processed through virtual machines. Mm-hmm. So when we see a document that triggers an exploit detection, then we know targeted attack document file, mm-hmm. and that gets flagged in our system as PDF that drops an executable, mm-hmm. so that's bad. And then we can go back and with the ones that have been flagged, get the original PDF that just dropped as a decoy.
Right.
Right, and then, okay, so that's what we've analyzed.
That's what we realized. It's a little bit more complicated than that. We can't just take every PDF file which drops a binary, like an exe file, because that would get all of the exploit kits which use PDF exploits to drop binaries. They also drop binaries.
Okay.
So what we do here is that we take PDF, doc, XLS, PowerPoint files, which do drop a binary, but also drop a clean file. So a PDF which drops another PDF, or a doc file which drops another doc file, and that's the date file.
Right.
That's the file that's shown to the user. And this is basically the rule. So we look at files which are document files which drop the same kind of document file and a backdoor. And then we look at the dropped file and extract text from there to figure out who the target would have been. So we built, for example, word clouds out of these. So for example, when we look at the files that were used in targeted attacks which make references to political themes, and just take the most common words used in these document files. Well, the three most common files in all the files we looked at were China, USA, India. And then words like space, international, crisis, security, Russia, military. So it's interesting to see what kind of fake stories or fake documents are being generated by the attackers.
Yeah, it's interesting to note that 65% are political themed. India's in there quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
There was the Mac malware that had some connections to India.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting how little India gets noticed in the press as far as APTs, but it is related to Pakistan. The stuff from India.
This is all new.
Yeah, that all does tie. So that is a growing trend to see India in this word cloud, and
Mm-hmm.
it's something in H1 that we did see some notice of. The guys at Norman published a paper.
That's right.
In
fact, if you look at the bigger picture, I mean, if you look at which countries are doing targeted attacks like these against other countries, well, China is doing them, United States is doing them, and Russia is doing them. But during H1, we can now add India and Pakistan to the list, because it's not just India attacking Pakistan, it's also the other way around.
Yeah.
And the attacks between India and Pakistan are very, very clearly around, for example, the military leadership, the generals in both armies, the political leaders. So it's very interesting to see how these real-world political scenarios play into these online attacks.
And I would expect the military, which is 14 and 11%, to shrink over time as well, because they would move towards watering holes to try to nail those targets, as opposed to send documents.
Which is very true.
So the growth of the political percentage being 65%, you think activists at this point, still not having a corporate IT department to back them up to prevent them from opening up a document file, whereas the defense contractors ought to be filtering out documents, but that's where they have to evolve the watering hole attack to get those kind of guys.
Right. And there's interesting detail in this word cloud for the corporate files we were looking at. And by the way, the total amount of files we're looking at here isn't that huge. We're talking about a few hundred files altogether. But there's interesting words like AIAA or IEEE, or specific organizations like Loeb or NARI or Saranya mentioned in the word cloud. So this is all automatically extracted from the APT files we were looking at. And here's the last word cloud, which we were categorizing under military targets, so attacks which were targeting non-military targets or defense targets of various kinds.
Right, based on the addresses involved or the names?
Yes. All right. Then we spoke a little bit about the ransomware attacks. Let's actually go back here. Ransomware hasn't gone anywhere. We continue to see big problems with the Reveton ransom family, the Urusuai ransom family, and what is it, Winlock is the one we were, or Browlock? No, Browlock, which is another new family. But the idea is always the same.
Browlock's naming schemes are very practical.
Yes, they are. Browlock, Browserlock. Now, malware which tries to make the money by forcing the user to pay money to regain access to either his data or to his computer. And some of these are blatant about what they do, like I'm a Trojan, I locked your system, pay me. Some of them try to blame it on someone else, like, I'm the RIAA, we found illegal torrented movies from your system, pay your copyright fee, otherwise we'll lock your PC. And it's always the criminals doing this. It's not the RIAA for real, although in some cases it might look like it's the RIAA, and you would probably believe it from the RIAA, but it's not the RIAA. Another interesting thing we learned during this first half of the year was that Reveton family, while it keeps your system locked and while you're going to figure out how to pay for the ransom, it's actually using your computer to make money by mining bitcoins on the infected machine. And that's a fairly creative way of making money.
I've had some questions about that, but we save that for the Bitcoin.
Well, actually, we're going up to Bitcoin. We can move to Bitcoin right now. That's the next topic, actually, and that's a much bigger topic in the long run as well, because when we think about monetization mechanisms that we've seen in malware, or first we saw spam. You take over a large amount of computers, you use them to send spam, you make money.
Steal contact lists, sell them as commodities.
Yes, or just use the bandwidth of the computers and the reputation of the computers. If you just send spam from one single server, it gets blacklisted very quickly. If you send spam from a million home computers, they have good reputation. They can get their emails sent out. That's the logic why spam was where it all started from 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Then we saw other monetization mechanisms like keyloggers stealing credit cards and passwords, backing Trojans, stealing money from your bank accounts. But this new Bitcoin thing is different. It's changing the way we think about monetization, because Bitcoin attacks don't steal money from the user. Bitcoin mining with botnets doesn't affect the user at all. The user is irrelevant. There can be a user on the computer, or you don't need to have a user on the computer, and it will make exactly the same amount of money in both cases, which means the user is losing nothing. Nothing is being stolen directly from the user's own pocket, if you will.
CPU cycles extra power and slightly higher power bill, but
yes,
yeah, not as hard to quantify as far as pain goes.
That's right. So, and for that, we really have to start from this guy, Satoshi Nakamoto, who in 2008 published a scientific paper in a crypto conference. And in that scientific paper, he described this complicated thing he called a blockchain, and a peer-to-peer network in which the members of the network would do all these complicated mathematical functions of this blockchain, and that blockchain could then be used to create a virtual currency. A currency based on math. A currency where the value of the currency is not based on gold or dollars or anything in the real world. The value is just based on the fact that people find it useful as a way of sending currency around or money around. And Bitcoin is successful. That's proven by the fact that people are interested in it and people are actually using it. I've used Bitcoin myself, and I strongly believe in cryptocurrencies. I don't think it's going to be Bitcoin in the long run which will be the savior or the big shift, but I do think it's one of the related currencies, or one of the sons of Bitcoin, if you will. The idea behind cryptocurrencies is a very strong one, not just between consumers or individuals, but for example, for trade, for companies, for large sums to be moved around. When you have a free way of moving wealth around, it is very powerful. However, every single cryptocurrency has the same two main problems. Problem number one, how do you inject new currency into the system without causing inflation? Problem number two, how do you confirm the transactions between the users without having a central bank or chain of banks? And the way the algorithm created by Satoshi Nakamoto solved these two problems was that he joined the problems. Every time you send currency from one user into peer-to-peer network to another user, the transaction is confirmed by other members of the network. And why would anybody do such work for other members of the network is that they get rewarded for it. The Bitcoin algorithm rewards free Bitcoins to users who confirm transactions for other users. And this means you can actually make money by building systems that do nothing but mine Bitcoins, basically confirm transactions for other users. And 4 years ago, when Bitcoin was very cheap, like 1 cent per Bitcoin, hobbyists were building systems like these. You take cheapest possible computer you can find, and you leave it running for months, and it will eventually make $15 worth of Bitcoins. But when Bitcoin value started growing, things changed. First, people got really interested in the guy who invented it, Mr. Satoshi Nakamoto, and they wanted to speak with him and interview him. And then they learned that Satoshi Nakamoto doesn't exist. There is no Satoshi Nakamoto. Today, we don't know who invented the whole Bitcoin. The second thing that happened was that people started doing mining very professionally because it was suddenly valuable. Today, 1 Bitcoin is worth $140. So today, you can actually go to commercial manufacturers who build purpose-built Bitcoin mining rigs, like this one right here, which costs you around $30,000 and will do nothing else than mine Bitcoins. You can't use this device to do nothing except mine Bitcoins, and it costs you $30,000, and people buy these and get their money back. Isn't that weird?
Yeah, what's the power consumption of this kind of box?
Well, this actually is very good regarding power consumption. Most mining originally was done with normal PCs, then with purpose-built systems based out of gaming video cards, GPU cards like NVIDIA and AMD cards, which take a lot of power. This is an ASIC-based miner, so it actually uses about 1 light bulb or 2 light bulbs, so nothing that bad. They become very powerful, and this also means that the people who got really serious about mining, well, they also realized that to mine Bitcoins, you don't have to mine with your own computer. You can mine with someone else's computer. And, yeah, go ahead.
Well, so with Bitcoin, okay, so when you say that you can participate in the transactions and that gets you Bitcoins, 1 Bitcoin, but like, are you talking, if you don't actually mine the Bitcoins, but rather you just participate in the transactional process where it earns you, is it like Bitcoin karma? Because you can divide Bitcoins into fractions.
That's right.
Right. So does how long does it take before you actually earn a Bitcoin? And do you need to earn a Bitcoin before you actually have anything?
Right. Well, since 1 Bitcoin is right now $140, a fraction of a Bitcoin is already useful, depending on what you want to do with the coins.
So can you participate and earn fractions of a Bitcoin, or is it?
The way most people mine today is that they're not trying to mine whole Bitcoins or Bitcoin blocks themselves. They join into pools, which basically means there's 1,000 guys mining together, and every time someone gets lucky and mines a block and makes 25 Bitcoins, they split the Bitcoins to everybody who participated. So you get Bitcoins even though you didn't find anything.
By mining a block?
Yes.
Okay.
By mining, you get, every time you mine a whole block, you get 25 Bitcoins right now.
Okay, so going back to the Reviton and the ransomware that's locking the computer and then mines, and see Weaver had tweeted at you they ought to be going after Litecoin because that's easier, and a couple of days before that you had tweeted that Bitcoin is now at a difficulty of 1 million, but 1 million is what?
100 million.
100 million.
Yes.
100 million what? Relative to some just arbitrary index that Bitcoin keeps, or relative to how many flops the CPU needs to make, or?
The algorithm created by Satoshi Nakamoto is very clever. So it also adjusts for the amount of people doing the mining. So the more we have people in this peer-to-peer network mining, trying to make Bitcoins, or actually trying to confirm transactions for others, which is what they're basically doing when they are mining, the algorithm will make it harder to find new Bitcoins if there are lots of miners to keep the level relatively the same. So now that we see lots of people getting into this game and lots of botnets getting into this game and all these new ASIC-based servers getting into this game, there's more and more computing power. So the difficulty level is automatically adjusted with a little bit of delay by the algorithm.
Okay.
And last weekend, or was it the weekend before that, we broke the 100 million difficulty level, which is artificial. I mean, it's just a number.
It's an arbitrary rating, but it's Bitcoin's kind of.
It tells us that it's now very hard to find this. You really need powerful machines to find new Bitcoins. And it will go down as well. I mean, if there are machines taken offline from this network, it will go down. It's just automatic system. Okay. And the way you compare this to other coins, because there are competing coins like Litecoin or Zero Coin or what have you, they're different. Litecoin, as its name implies, is lighter. You don't have to have as massive computing capability to find and create new Litecoins.
Right.
In fact, Litecoin difficulty in their own, I just checked it, is around 1,000 right now, not 100 million.
1,000?
Yes.
Okay. And what's the value of one Litecoin?
It's much less than a Bitcoin. Actually, I haven't checked that lately, but it's less than $1.
Because the economics, as far as being a commodity and then therefore a currency, that part I kind of got. But Bitcoin, I've also known that Bitcoin has a finite number of Bitcoins, but they're not all available not all the blocks are currently available to be mined.
That's right. And this is how Bitcoin beats inflation. The amount of new Bitcoins created is predefined. We know how they will appear from now for the next 100 years. And when all the Bitcoins have been issued, there will be 21 million Bitcoins, which many critiques, and I think is way too low a number. It means we really have to split them into fractions of fractions if you want to keep them useful, if they become valuable
and
enough.
If Moore's law continues over time, processors get more powerful,
Right.
so that's how long before it really...
Like, I buy a pack of gum, I pay 0.000000001 Bitcoin, which is really unuseful. So that's one thing Satoshi got wrong with the algorithm. He should have created much more Bitcoins than 21
So
million
today's
Bitcoins.
malware author, should they be mining Litecoin, or should they still be investing in Bitcoin?
Well, we probably don't want to give them advice, but yeah, they should be mining Litecoins instead of Bitcoin. And we started seeing botnets that mined for cryptocurrencies a little over a year ago. Here's one example, one of the first ones we saw. It's a control panel for a Bitcoin botnet. Here's an ad taken from an underground website where somebody's explaining how he's developed this bot, which is selling to other people. If you're running a botnet, you could just buy this silent miner for $5 for a unique binary from him, and it will run silently in the background and mine for both Bitcoin and Litecoin, and you can pay him in Liberty Reserve, which tells you that this is from May or before May. I took the screenshot in April, actually, because Liberty Reserve was shut down in May. So we know it can't be brand new. And then in the threat report, we also calculate back of the envelope calculation on how much money some of these Bitcoin mining botnets could be making. And we use here as an example Zero Access, which is, like mentioned earlier, the second largest botnet on the planet. And we make some estimates. For example, around 100,000 new PCs are being infected by Zero Access every day. From that, we estimated around 2 million machines could be at the disposal of these guys at any given moment to do whatever they want. And Zero Access used to monetize themselves with spam and especially click fraud. But for a while, they were just doing Bitcoin mining. So if you take 2 million machines, then we make an assumption that 5% of those machines are gaming machines, so gaming desktops, which has an NVIDIA or an AMD GPU graphics card, which means it's useful for mining purposes. And then we estimate $100 exchange rate for 1 Bitcoin. I think when we calculated this, mining difficulty was way low. Actually, it's much higher nowadays. Nevertheless, they could still be making tens of thousands of dollars every day. But that's the trick here, though, is Bitcoin is anonymous. Well, it's not anonymous, it's pseudonymous. As long as you keep the Bitcoin in the system, it's very hard to find you. But we're guessing that most of the criminals who gain large amounts of Bitcoin will want to move them to dollars or euros or maybe rubles, right?
They have ATM machines in Canada that are Bitcoin capable these days. So.
Which means they can be subpoenaed. Or if you use MT-GOX or any other exchange service to move Bitcoins to real-world currencies, you can be found.
Yeah, so who did it get moved to? Yeah,
exactly. So and that's the weak point for the criminals, and that we like that. If they move their money out of the system, then it should be possible to find them. All right, that's, I guess, the Bitcoin part. Unless you have any other questions. There's a long article about Bitcoin theft as well, and Trojans that do that, and so on.
There are some flaws in Android about being able to steal Bitcoin wallets.
That's right.
Things like this will be trending upwards, I imagine, as Bitcoin does as well.
Then we also speak about exploit kits, especially Black Hole, Sweet Orange, Cool exploit kit, and some others. We have a timeline of the new exploit kit packs as we've been finding them through this year. Red Dot, White Hole, Flim Kit, Neutrino, Flashback, Dotka, Sticks, and then maps of where in the world we've been finding these. And then we have basically a list of the CVEs, like the vulnerabilities that are popular right now in these different exploit kits. So
Java being the start. Java in the browser being the problem.
Yeah, and maybe we should emphasize that once again. We don't really hate Java. We hate the Java plugin in the browser. That's the problem. There's nothing wrong with the programming language. It's the plugin in the browser. Get rid of the plugin in the browser. You don't need the plugin in your. If you need the plugin in your browser, have a separate browser for that. Otherwise, drop it. You don't need it. Some slides about the situation with Mac malware. Let's see. Yeah. Well, it's in the threat report. I actually don't have a screenshot of it to show in here. But obviously, one of the topics that has been very high on the agenda for the first half of the year has been governmental attacks. Definitely the Snowden leaks, what we learned about U.S. intelligence, NSA surveillance, another activity. One group that has been in the headlines over and over again is the SEA, Syrian Electronic Army. And this is an example of a group which is very active and which links to the real-world governments probably aren't very tight at all. They like to position themselves with the Assad government in Syria, but we have no reason to believe they're actually connected directly with them in any way. Nevertheless, they've been making interesting attacks, like defacement of New York Times, which is surprising, really, that somebody's able to do this. This wasn't a traditional hack, was it, Sean?
No, it was through third-party stuff, right?
Yeah, it was name server. So they gained access to the DNS entries of New York Times. The server running New York Times wasn't breached in any way, but NewYorkTimes.com domain name pointed for a while to a different place, which reaches exactly the same end result. And then they've been targeting not just New York Times, but media in general. And this is interesting. When you have a group like this which wants to gain or run a very clear political agenda, they're trying to do it not by targeting military targets or governmental targets, but by targeting media. For example, Associated Press, and Associated Press's Twitter account. So how important is Associated Press's Twitter account? Well, just Twitter account, right? Turns out it has 2 million followers. And when they gained access, the Syrian Electronic Army gained access to AP Twitter account, they posted one tweet. It's pictured right here, which is breaking. 2 explosions in the White House. Barack Obama is injured. That's the tweet. What would you think if you would see that from AP? Would you believe that?
Coming from Twitter? Would I
Yes.
believe that? I take a grain of salt that breaking news on Twitter, CNN should be verified. But I would then turn to other sources.
Right. But
I would certainly think that's worth investigating.
Absolutely, yes. So, yeah. So you might not believe it wholeheartedly,
but an eyewitness.
But you would drop everything, right?
Well, I would pull up and start searching, yes, on the web for stories about that, yeah.
And of course, there's two factors in play here. One is the shock value of people who saw this. But the other one, even more important one, is the shock value not to people but to bots, to robots, high-speed trading robots, which trade. Like at any given moment, 70% of trade on any large stock exchange is done by bots, and they follow stock exchange releases and breaking news, and they make automatic decisions based on things like these. And here is the New York Stock Exchange trading for the day when this happened. Then the tweet comes out right about here. You see that?
Yes, doesn't look good on that.
Yes, it did recover immediately, but I mean that's what they did. That's what they accomplished with 140 characters.
But you knew that was going to happen already, right? I mean, it's a favorite story of mine from 2012 is that Berkshire, is it Berkshire?
Hathaway, yeah.
Yeah.
Warren Buffett.
Right, that goes up whenever there's an Anne Hathaway movie.
Is there a relation to these guys?
Well, because Anne Hathaway goes out, Hathaway is in Twitter a lot, and then people have actually studied it, and that Warren Buffett's stock goes up just incrementally up when there's a good Anne Hathaway movie out. So the algorithms are watching everything, all of the keywords.
Are you telling me Anne Hathaway should buy?
No, Anne Hathaway should do something that makes her name in the paper and go buy
she
stock.
Should buy some stock. Yes.
I guess she can manipulate the algorithms.
Yes.
So news like this that is breaking and looks catastrophic, the algorithms are watching. So this is not good to have too much of Wall Street tuned in to
Twitter.
Well, maybe good for them long run, but short term, someone took a bath, I guess.
Yes, that's right. And when we look at the bigger picture of the various targets, this group has been targeting, it's remarkable how they've been able to reach world-class media, pretty much every single one of them.
Through high-tech means or low-tech?
Mostly low-tech, but
Right.
some of them...
Human engineering.
Yes,
Yeah.
mostly that.
Well, so in that regard, evolutionarily speaking,
Mm.
high-tech. But
I do find it interesting that they did also target the Onion.
yeah, the Onion had that they had in a serious post on what site was it? GitHub, or they posted they actually let the attack continue running so they could backtrace it for a while, and then they goaded on the attackers by publishing
Everything.
Publishing everything, and
they actually have a very good technical
taunting.
write-up. We recommend you check that out.
So they've got actually and unlike other organizations that want to cover up what exactly happened while they investigate, the Onion basically took advantage of it, goaded the attackers to continue trying to compromise their systems so they could trace it, and then they have a very good write-up of the whole thing.
Recommended. Here's the Mac malware slide I was looking for earlier. The amount of activity on Mac continues to grow, but it's obviously still far below what we're seeing on Windows side. The difference is so big it's not even funny. However, there is enough Mac malware today that we can't recommend running a Mac without an antivirus anymore. 2 years ago, somebody would have asked me, do you need an antivirus on your Mac? I would have said, no, you don't. Today, I'm saying, unfortunately, you do. It has changed. You run the risk of running into real malware on your OS X Mac today. Not on your phone, but on your PC or on your Mac computer. And a couple of words to end up our webcast about Prism, and then we'll take a couple of questions to the end. It's remarkable. The whole summer has been remarkable related to what we've seen about the leaks. And the leaks that we've seen from Mr. Snowden are extraordinary. They are different from almost all the other leaks we've seen lately. This is different from the fact that most of the, or all the material that we've seen leaked from Snowden has been top secret classified, which is rare. We don't really see top secret material leaking from US intelligence, but here we've seen lots of files, hundreds of files so far leaked, and there's probably much more to come. As American, what do you think about all this?
In a short statement, it's well, it's been interesting.
It's complicated.
Yeah, it's important. It is distracting from crimeware, though.
Oh yeah.
So over the summer holidays, when a New York Times reporter tried to reach us for comment about the guys that were being indicted and arraigned or processed through the system for their hacks on NASDAQ in 2008, 2009. So when I'm thinking of watering holes currently, forum.nasdaq was one thing that was hacked. So there's more than so. In one sense, it's very much in the press, and it's a political issue.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, these things always go through cycles. So there was the summer of lulls, and now it's the NSA and government. There's no technological solution to this. It's a political thing.
Mm.
And unfortunately, all the tech news, there is some crime and crime-war gangs out there that so if someone has hacked NASDAQ, I mean, and before we've been worried about SCADA systems and Stuxnet and oh no, someone can turn off the power. But I've lived without power, I've lived without water because natural disasters happen. But if I wake up tomorrow and my bank account and your bank account says zero, because some crimeware guys have gotten into NASDAQ or some other banking systems and just decide to erase a bunch of accounts maliciously because they can actually take advantage of that. That is still my bigger fear than the politics of what's going on related to the crypto stuff. Now, it's President Obama should be, I think, taking the task for saying you can't have 100% security and 100% privacy, because I'd stop him right there and say, you're right, you can't have 100% security. All the time I'm trying to tell our own marketing department, we offer layers of security. We provide a service that provides if you give a guy a Kevlar vest, he shouldn't think all of a sudden he's Superman. He's not invulnerable. He has an additional component of security. So for the president to say, you can't have 100% security, well, just stop right there. Boom, that's the argument right there. You're right, you can't. So why are you trying? So why are you trying, and why do they continue to try? So that's the political position that the way the American democracy works is somehow they can't admit that. I mean, so nobody expects them to stop hurricanes from taking out New Jersey. Nobody expects them to stop wildfires. Our management of forests in the West have been so bad. There's brush, big fires. Also, all these things, nobody expects the President of the United States to protect them from that 100% of the time.
Right.
But terrorist, scary terrorist.
Yes.
That we have to protect people.
Existential risk.
Existential risk 100% of the time. And so therefore you can't have 100% privacy.
So
it's like I don't want 100% security. I just want reasonable security so that I can maintain reasonable privacy. And that's the thing they haven't really.
And the thing that really bugs me most about the revelations is the fact that we now know U.S. intelligence agencies are infiltrating standardization bodies to sabotage crypto algorithms on purpose. So we take something which would be secure, and then we go and we sabotage it on purpose to make it less secure.
That's where I take things with a grain of salt, though.
Well,
I really like Patrick Gray's conversation where, like, committees, international committees, self-sabotage enough as it is. So how do you tell the difference between what the NSA is actively engaged in and what they just sit back and watch happen and don't fix? Because they've got guys on payroll they surely could fix the crypto standards, but they just don't because some other idiot on the forum committee.
What about Skype? Skype used to be secure. It used to be end-to-end encryption. There was no way for Skype itself to see, for example, what people were chatting with. Then it was bought by a US company, and now it is insecure. So they took something secure and made it less secure. How's that?
Because they needed a centralized server, because when it got bought by eBay, it needed the reliability that peer-to-peer couldn't offer. How much of that is a business decision? How much of that is actual security decision?
All right. So we don't really know.
I take, so that's why I don't like, but I want to get to the root of it and say, like, you can't have 100% security. No. I want reasonable security so that I can have reasonable privacy.
Right.
And the stuff that's coming out isn't good, but it doesn't really address the real problem. Is a political problem that the American people and partner nations need to say to the states, we don't want 100% security. Stop it. Then the technical stuff, like, we need to go back and focus on crimeware and other types of hacking that could actually financially damage me more. I'm a lot more likely myself to be a victim of cybercrime than any of this nation-state nonsense that's going on.
Right.
So.
And the reason all this is possible is that U.S. legislation allows U.S. intelligence agencies to monitor traffic of foreigners when they use U.S.-based services, and we're almost all foreigners on this planet, and we all, us foreigners, we use American services, making us.
Some of us opt out of certain services.
Like Google?
Like Google, yeah.
We had a little bit of problem getting this webcast started an hour ago because of Google.
Because Google wanted us to connect our YouTube account to the account that we were using from the Hangout. And unfortunately, because we have multiple YouTube accounts, it kept throwing one at us when it should have been throwing the other. Which is why you can go look at our blog and see my personal post about why I don't have a Google account anymore. And now these guys know why I don't have a Google account anymore, because it's extremely frustrating. But again, take control, opt out of.
Take control of your life. Take control of your digital life.
If you don't want the U.S. spying on you, don't use U.S. services for all that.
All right.
There are services in Europe, in Asia.
And hopefully in the future there are even more services like that. Maybe coming from F-Secure. But I think that's for the threat report. Let's have a look at some of the questions that we've received over the last couple of days and maybe during the webcast.
Somebody was curious via one channel is if you could plant malware on the plane that would then maybe go after devices being plugged. So if you could put something there that on the plane sat there and waited for someone plugging in their USB device. I would imagine you could hack a plane to do that.
Scary scenario, yeah.
Doesn't sound impossible to me.
No, it doesn't.
Have we seen an increase in malware families?
Flying tomorrow.
You have chargers, though, right? Not USB in the airplane jack. Have we seen malware that start executing but wait a while before they do so in order to avoid debugging?
Yes, we see these regularly. Or they wait for a reboot, or they wait for a specific date until they do it. Many of these do it on purpose to avoid automatic emulation systems or the virtual systems that, for example, we use in our labs to see what malware would do when we run it. So if they start only doing what they do after 30 hours, it would be trickier for us to do that. However, we have ways around that. And no, we're not going to tell you what they are. Thank you.
Keep the modifications to ourselves, yeah. And then there's other systems that do the analysts. We do brute force debugging as well, so it's not just about our emulation.
Yes. Well, we've spent the last 6-7 years building our backend systems to automate this to as far as we can take it, and it's pretty neat.
So what organizational and external factors makes an organization likely to fall victim to a targeted attack? They have human beings.
Right. But it's, if you're a local pizza place,
yeah,
you will never be hit by an APT. Like, you have nothing worth stealing. So that's step number one. You have to be an interesting target for some kind of spy, right? If you are a local pizza place, you're not going to be hit by spies. If you are a defense contractor, you will be hit by spies. And if you are a target of espionage, whether it's industrial espionage or nation-state espionage, then you will be most likely targeted by APTs as well. I guess that's the easy answer.
But as far, I think the question, what makes them more likely to fall victim?
Right.
It's so human beings are the weak link. There are, I've heard one website, I think it was like fishme.com, and they set up phishing attacks to go after your own organization so your security officer could test, and 60% of the organizations that they test, or 60% of the people in the organization fall victim to the phishing. And phishing should be a really basic security know-how, like I should avoid this type of thing, but it just doesn't work to teach people security. So my focus in the last several months has been to suggest that productivity training would be a better thing to do. I've asked dozens of reporters, other people from other organizations. Since the law firm where I worked, I have not once been taught how to use Outlook better. The lawyers who needed to bill every single minute that they could were trained to use things as efficiently as possible and be power users of Word and Outlook. And in my inbox, it took me half a day to figure out the logic puzzle of what rules do I want to have, but basically I've got an inbox, a to folder, and a CC folder. I answer inbox first, to next, and then CC after that, because I let other people do the work. A targeted attack would be in my inbox with maybe a dozen emails per day. It would look out of place.
Right.
But
so you would be able to tell.
So you teach people to use stuff productively, they're more productive, they're happier, and you have security as a consequence.
And you can train the security concerns at the same time. Tell them what it looks like and show them.
Or it'll just stand out if they're doing it right. What I'm saying is if you try to teach security, you're going to fail. So
that's a good point.
The organizations that are more likely to fall victim to targeted attacks are the ones that are sloppy, that haven't trained their people how to use what they're using. So with Bring Your Own Device, IT departments ought to be supporting that people actually know how to use their device efficiently on the network, as opposed to just like figure it out yourself. If you're letting your people figure it out themselves, they're going to be victims. Okay. So education, but not security education.
Well, some security education. Well, there's basic stuff as well. I mean, stuff like that. If you get an email,
awareness.
If you get an email from someone, and then you later discuss the email with that someone, and they have no idea what you're talking about, that's a warning signal. Yeah. Don't just drop it. Investigate it, report it. It's basic stuff.
Yeah, but what I mean by security training, security awareness, basic stuff. But if you're either skeptical or not, and then there's training, or there's rewiring the human brain. A lot of stuff social engineering takes advantage of stuff that just cannot be trained in one session or one day. It's something you have to do 24/7, and it's a specialist who's working in that field who picks that stuff up. Okay. I mean, you can't be a nuclear scientist, and I can't be a chemist day to day. I can take a chemistry class and get it for the day that I'm playing with the chemicals, and I can mix stuff. You shouldn't let me anywhere near chemicals a week later, right? Because I'm going to mix something up that explodes. So I have a good understanding of the basics of chemistry and an appreciation for it, but that's what I mean about you can't train people to spot fraud. You can be more aware that there's fraud out there. But again, put the money into the productivity, and then the attacks, the bait, will stick out as an anomaly. And then they'll be like, I should call my IT department.
Right. This is what they told me in the training.
Right. That's when it'll come back. The debate awareness will come back.
We have time for one or two more questions.
All right. Let's see here. What do you think of Anonymous's point-and-click hack tool and the kids that follow suit?
Anonymous point-and-click hack tool. I don't know what they're talking about.
Oh, logic, low
You mean the
orbit ion
oh,
cannon.
that's a
We
denial.
haven't really heard a lot from Anonymous.
That's not a hack tool. That's a denial of service tool.
Yeah. So,
It's not really a big problem anymore.
is it freedom of speech? I guess is probably what the questioner is asking. Is it a digital sit-in? I think sit-ins actually require sitting in front of a building and getting arrested as part of actual civil disobedience. Anonymous tools aren't accountable, and therefore I have some difficulty equating it with a digital sit-in. If it's not, so if you're actually sitting in and you're willing to put your ass on the line.
I have a more philosophical viewpoint here. Maybe it should be classified differently by laws. Maybe it should be classified as a city. Maybe it should not be illegal. Maybe it should be exactly like cities. However, for that, the laws in most countries would have to be changed. And most of the people who are using tools like LOIC right now are the people who will be ruling this country in a decade or two and will be making the laws. And if you still then think that they should be legal, then you can change the laws. How's that?
Sounds good.
All right.
Yeah, because if there's no crime in it, then let people do it. But then there must be accountability, saying, well, Sean's spending his bandwidth protesting.
Yeah.
But the law has to be changed for that.
Okay.
That's difficult.
And 1 minute.
Yeah. Let's see. And then we had over here on Twitter. Search. Oh, let me ask you a question myself. How long do you think before the iOS 7 is hacked, or jailbroken?
Jailbroken?
Yeah.
A month? How's that?
A month? All right. So, want to bet a beer?
I'll bet a beer.
Okay. 1 month.
What's your bet?
I've read that people are sitting on iOS vulnerabilities and haven't disclosed them yet because they want to save them so they can jailbreak. So I'm going to guess less than a month.
Less than a month. If it's more than a month, I buy you a beer. Less than a month, you buy me a beer. Today is the 23rd of September 2013, and this was the F-Secure webcast for the Mobile Threat Report H1. My name is Mikko Hyppönen. Here's Sean Sullivan.
Thanks for the delay, waiting for the delay, through the delay, and thanks for joining.
Thank you.